4 hours later.
I think that we also need to be really candid about is just because an opportunity presents itself doesn't mean the opportunity is aligned and fitting for me. We need to really be honest about that. And I think when you apply willy-nilly without giving a thought, unfortunately, you run the risk of applying for the wrong things. So, welcome back to my channel. My name is Dambisa Dube. Before we dive into today's topic, which you'll see from the title, we're talking all things fellowships. I've been asked this a lot, not just about fellowships, but also scholarship opportunities, and I thought it would make sense to just share some tips and some gems that have helped me in my application processes, but also just to give context into the type of research fellowship that I'm currently doing. But before we dive straight into it, I just want to thank everybody who's watched the first episode already and has directly contacted me and reached out to me. It's only been a couple of days and I was terrified. I'm glad I took the leap, and it's only just been encouraging from people who've reached out to me, who've shared some tips. So for those who are perhaps watching for the first time and are not familiar with who I am, I would encourage you to watch the first episode because I give a lot of context into who I am, my why, what drives me, why this particular platform, why now, and what type of content one can expect. So if you haven't done that, I just want to encourage you to watch the first episode. Today we'll be diving into all things fellowships. Why don't we know enough about them? I guess that's probably the million-dollar question. And most importantly, what are the benefits? Why do a research fellowship? And I think we also need to be candid about the disadvantages. So before I dive into all the details, I just want to give a bit of context into the German Chancellor Fellowship that I am currently doing. I am currently one of the German Chancellor Fellows who was selected by the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation over a year ago, and I am part of the 2022-2023 cohort and arrived sometime last year and have been in Germany since then. So the German Chancellor Fellowship is targeted at prospective leaders. And I know we hear this everywhere, but what does it actually really mean? It's specifically targeted at individuals who have a track record of having led processes or having worked very independently and perhaps even been a leader and held some high mid-senior position. I think what's really, really important to bear in mind for this particular opportunity is that age is really not a factor, but what they really do consider is how many years ago did you get your first bachelor's degree? And I believe it's 12 years. I could be wrong, but I will put a link in the description for people to have a look at the information. So that's really, really important to bear in mind if you are thinking, Aish, I'm over a certain age. Does this opportunity appeal to people like myself? Age is not a factor at all. The second thing one needs to factor in is that this research fellowship is extremely accommodating for those who'd like to travel with their partners, for those who'd like to travel with their kids and families. So that was definitely a selling point for me, because not only are they targeting prospective leaders and people who have a track record of having done really impressive work, they also make it so accommodating that your situation, your context can really fit in. And in my experience in the past 7 months, the foundation has been nothing but accommodating for my 2 kids that I'm here with. So if you have a family, or perhaps you have a child, or you have a partner, and you have to find your balance in terms of your situation, I just want to say, don't be discouraged. Just a disclaimer to say this applies to this particular fellowship, but in terms of fellowships in general, depending on the institution that the fellowship is financed by, the conditions obviously vary. I know that there aren't so many fellowships that are as accommodating to families and partners. Another thing one needs to bear in mind for this particular fellowship is that it's a relatively generous fellowship in terms of the stipend that they give. I know that the lowest amount that is offered for this fellowship is around 2.1. I know this increases and changes according to budgets available, but that's already 2.1 thousand euros, and that's already quite decent. So it's a fairly competitive fellowship for people who are currently working and feel like, well, I don't want to leave my comfortable job in terms of finances. I think what makes this particular opportunity appealing is that the amount that we receive monthly is relatively reasonable. The fellowship is not as intensely academic, and by that I mean you have a nice balance between doing your research but also doing some implementation and doing work that is really, really defined by you. And by that I mean it is a requirement when you apply for you to come up with a project that aims to find a solution for some global problem. This sounds super vague, and I am intentionally phrasing it that way because they're not specifically targeting individuals from specific sectors or only those who are currently in academia. You could be working currently as, like in my case, as an advisor for a development corporation. You could be a journalist, you could be an engineer, you could be a teacher, but you are looking for an opportunity, perhaps a career break, or an opportunity to cross into another thematic area or industry. This would be the perfect opportunity to do that because you're required to come up with a project from start to finish where you detail what you aim to achieve with it. And I believe this is what fellowships really are, where you are financially supported to carry out a research topic or a project, and you work fairly independently. So depending on the field or the institution, fellowships really can range in terms of how long they are. This particular fellowship is a year. In some cases, an extension can be granted up to 3 months or so, but there are a whole bunch of conditions that go into making or granting a fellow an extension in this case. So it's important that when you're thinking of applying for the German Chancellor Fellowship, that one, you have a project idea, you want to solve some problem, identified a gap in your sector and would like to carry out a project independently. This particular fellowship is for you. Before you even apply for the German Chancellor Fellowship, you're required to have a host. A host could be an individual, it could be an institution, it could be a ministry, but you need someone or people who are going to be supporting you to carry out your project. So unlike when you do your PhD, for example, or a master's where you have your supervisor who you consult with, and in this particular case, that supervisor would be an institution, an individual, whoever you pick, who you feel would contribute to the success of your said project. So that's really, really important to bear in mind as well. I think where a lot of people get it wrong is that they just want to find a host in Germany for the sake, but there's an alignment missing. You need to be very clear from the onset before you approach certain hosts what you expect from them. A lot of people have actually approached me on LinkedIn specifically saying that they've been really struggling with finding hosts. And I think the mistake that we often make is that we don't necessarily pitch how it would benefit the host organization or individual that they host you. So my number one tip would be sell yourself. Be authentic, be honest, really reflect when you're putting down your ideas and you're thinking about what kind of project would I like to do that's perhaps aligned with your master's or your work. Be really, really candid with yourself and ask yourself, what does this aim to achieve? Who would be the best person or institution to align myself closely with for the project, but also beyond? So to think long term, to think strategically would be the way to go in this particular case. So that's the German Chancellor Fellowship in a nutshell. So what are the benefits of a fellowship in general? This particular one, but also in general. Fellowships allow you to work very independently. And I need to stress this again. Allow you to work very independently. This obviously has its pros and cons too. For people who really need a lot of structure, a fellowship can be very difficult to navigate because even when you have all the support structures in place, you really are the one steering the ship. And that can be extremely, extremely challenging. I definitely have found it challenging at times, but I think you can only grow from it. So you work independently with the guidance of others, but you're really given the free rein to think of ideas and to be stretched creatively. And I think you can only benefit from that in terms of any career growth. Another benefit of fellowships is that you get to network. You get to be visible. You are connected to one, the institution that grants the fellowship, but also to a huge network of alumni of said fellowships, to contacts, to other industries and sectors, because usually in these type of fellowships there's a network of people. In the German Chancellor Fellowship, there's a huge network of alumni who participated, but also those from other countries who are also participating in the fellowship. And you get to lean into their expertise. And I think if you tap into it, you can only grow from that. Sometimes when we are in our line of work, we're so limited, perhaps in our thinking and our vision. But with fellowships, accompanied by the independence that you gain, there's just so much opportunity to get visible, to put yourself out there. If you are on a career break and you perhaps are feeling stuck in your current job and are looking to jump ship, or even just lean into another interest of yours, a fellowship would be perfect for that. Because yes, you have to work hard, but you're also given the room to think about your ideas with all the support in the world. Another obvious benefit is that you get paid to do what you love. It's such a nice balance in research fellowships where you obviously are guided by certain guidelines and conditions, and you have to do a certain amount of work in a stipulated time period. But there is so much independence and there's so much time in between, depending on obviously how you plan it. But you get so much time to think freely and honestly do what you love. And obviously guided by guidelines and conditions of the said institution that grants you the fellowship. But you're given so much room to think creatively, to tap into other traits of yours, to strengthen certain capacities and not really be limited in that. Fellowships are so dynamic in nature. Research is dynamic in nature. Projects are dynamic in nature. And I can't stress enough how beneficial this is. So what are the cons? It requires a lot of hard work. We have to be really frank about that. Being given so much room and independence often means that you're steering the ship and there's nobody else who's going to be holding you accountable. You are the one who's responsible for all of it. And the cost, if you don't work hard, is that you would have wasted your time. And I think that's something that we just need to be honest about. It's hard work. It requires a lot of commitment. It requires a lot of discipline. And in the event that you do not achieve what you aim to achieve, it honestly is just a huge waste of time. The difference between a fellowship and a job is that you have specific deliverables, that are guided by something else or someone else. And whether you like it or not, you achieve them. And there's a certain time period and there's obviously consequences. In this case, you have to work hard and it's all on you. I feel like that's a huge deal for people who perhaps have never worked so independently. So that's just something to consider for fellowships. Something that's really important to consider when thinking of applying for fellowships is to really ask yourself why. It may sound appealing, but why do you specifically need this particular opportunity? You have to start with your why. I found that people who weren't successful in my year and had applied, the mistake that they often made is that they didn't think about the bigger picture. So you really need to think about your why. Why am I doing this? To what end? And who's going to help me achieve that? Because when you think and you are guided by that why, you're going to show up in your application process as authentically as possible, and authenticity wins. People will be able to spot somebody who is really trying to achieve a certain thing and they're very candid about it and they're very clear about it. I think intention is absolutely everything. That definitely helped me in my thinking when I was putting my project proposal together. It helped me when I reached out to hosts. It helps me still till this day when I'm feeling extremely discouraged and I'm putting, my work together and trying to see am I meeting my deadlines. You have to be intentional. It sounds so straightforward, but I think a lot of people miss it. So intentionality is absolutely important. That's something to really factor in. Another thing to factor in is perhaps the timing. A fellowship of this nature may be the best thing that can happen to somebody's career, but it also can be extremely disruptive because you are given this time and this free reign, and depending on the type of work that you currently may be doing or the industry that you may in, it might not be the best time. Another thing to factor in before applying is to really ask yourself if this opportunity will help you achieve whatever you want to achieve beyond the fellowship. Every fellowship has a limited time period. That can be 3 months, it can be a year. But at the end of the day, roles like this, opportunities like this do not last forever. So you have to think very strategically. will this particular period where I'm able to do work independently help me achieve whatever I set out to do for the remainder of my career? Because if you don't consider that, it ties again into your why and your intention. It can be extremely, disruptive to your career growth or your career trajectory. So I think fellowships really need people who are quite clear on one, what they want to achieve, but how this said thing will help them achieve whatever's going to come next. Another thing to consider when you're applying for fellowships is, do I have what it takes? Do I have the time? Do I have the drive? Do I even want to work independently? And can I be disciplined enough to do what I set out to do? I think it's very easy to put a project proposal together. It's very easy to sell yourself, but it's a whole different ballgame to actually be doing it. And fellowships require a lot of hard work and discipline. So do you have what it takes? Additionally to that, is this opportunity going to be beneficial for whatever else you want to do in the long term? And not only for your career, but also for you personally, because there's obviously so much that we gain personally from doing fellowships. So all this to say that I think fellowships are really, really guided by your intention. And if that's your starting point, it will help you not only when you apply, but also when you're doing your fellowship as well. So I'm going to be sharing 5 things that helped me in my application process for the German Chancellor Fellowship. But I think they're so generic that they can be very beneficial for anybody who's applying for scholarships or fellowships of this nature. The first thing is to identify your why. Why do you want to do this? Why now? Why must it be packaged within a fellowship? To achieve what? As simple as that. Second thing is then obviously connected to your why is to pick a project, to pick a focus, keep it as straightforward as possible. The bigger the idea, the more complicated it becomes, the harder it becomes to achieve. So really keep it straightforward, intentional, and clear. The third thing, this is very specific to the German Chancellor Fellowship, is to find a German host. This can be an institution, it can be an individual, but like I mentioned, this particular host needs to help you and support you to achieve success at the end, or your project outcomes and outputs. It can be an individual, it can be an institution, an academic institution, it can be an NGO. I mean, it really can be anything or anyone that's going to support you and make sure that you succeed in the end. I will leave a link in the description so that you can have a look at more information about finding hosts, and you can also contact me directly. I think in other cases where it's not the German Chancellor Fellowship that you're applying for, the same would apply, that you find a support, a supervisor, an institution, a network, whoever can support you to ensure that you become successful. Another tip is to research the institution that's giving you the fellowship, research the topic, because you might be doing something or aim to do something that's been done 1,000 times before. Research your panel that's going to be interviewing you. I mean, I cannot stress this enough. Just look into it. Come prepared. Don't apply for things for the sake. And I think research sets people apart. And another tip that helped me is to take your time. The nice thing about the German Chancellor Fellowship is that the application process is so long. And by the time you submit your application, which is usually in October of every year, you have literally the entire year to think about your idea, because the call is put out in March. That's almost an entire year to think of your idea, to reach out to potential hosts, and to think about whether this particular opportunity is best suited for you. In the event that it's not the German Chancellor Fellowship, I would still stress to take your time. A rushed application, unfortunately, sticks out too. And when I say stick out, not in a good way. When people are not prepared and are not clear on their ideas and whatever envisioned output or end goal that they have, it becomes extremely obvious. Additionally to the research, I would always recommend that you should research the institution that is funding or offering the fellowship. I think sometimes the alignment or misalignment has everything to do with who is offering the fellowship. I think it's important to be really, really intentional and strategic in who we align our applications to. When I applied for the fellowship, it was almost a non-brainer that I need to do this This is something that aligns with my goals. And if I position myself really well, one, to be accepted and have a successful application, but also to have a successful project. Once I would have finalized my fellowship, then I would be really, really well positioned in the sector. And fortunately for me, I was accepted. So I think this is something that is generic. It's generic advice that I would give anyone who is maybe missing, you're doing all the right things, but for whatever reason, you're not getting the opportunities that you're applying for. I think this is really, really important to consider. Winning formula for me, since I was in high school, throughout varsity, and definitely once I started working, is authenticity. This goes a long way. I think we need to just be ourselves. I think there's often this pressure that when you are in an application process, you need to present yourself in a certain way, have all the right, answers and responses, and maybe to a certain extent pretend to be something that you're not. I find that authenticity goes such a long way. Show up as you are, come prepared, and I feel that the right opportunities will land. And it may sound overly poetic or obvious, but I think this is something that a lot of people miss. I think people want individuals. I know particularly for this particular opportunity, this fellowship, they were really, really drawn to individuals, who we are as individuals and what kind of impact we want to make into the world. And so beyond the CVs and the accolades and the achievements that we may have made, I think what was important and what made us all stick out, who was selected from South Africa, was the fact that we all individually had something really special to contribute. And I think to move away from the German Chancellor Fellowship, I think this is advice I would give anyone. If you're applying for any scholarship, I think people are really, really interested in who you are as an individual. When I've sat on the other side in a selection process or panel, that was also important to me. It's very easy to pretend, to overly prepare, to come off nicely polished. But I think authenticity always wins. So I think this is something that people should really consider, especially for the German Chancellor Fellowship. But this is advice I'd give if you're applying for anything else. These opportunities are extremely competitive. So I think if you follow the advice I've given, but most importantly, if you just prepare yourself and make sure that you are as intentional as possible, you always stand the best chance to get the opportunity and to have a successful application. Don't give up. I think that what is important in the event that your application is unsuccessful is to reach out to the said panel or the institution to check why. What did you miss? I know that when I was on the receiving end, I really appreciated that and I happily gave back the feedback. Sometimes it's just between you and someone else and it's just one particular trait, or maybe they achieved one additional thing, or maybe they're just more aligned. And that was the reason why you were then not selected. And I think having this feedback can best prepare you for the next round. So never be embarrassed to follow up and check when your application is not successful. I hope these tips were helpful. I mean, what I'm sharing is not new. I'm also no career development expert. I'm just merely sharing from my own experiences, and I have been successful for the most part. And to be honest, I think when you are clear on your why, your intention in anything that goes beyond opportunities, I think it just helps you to prepare, to show up prepared. Sometimes you just need some time. Sometimes you need to stay put in whatever you're doing. And we can be easily discouraged when we get denied and when we don't get an opportunity when we feel like the time is right. And not to be too philosophical, but I honestly think that timing is a big part of it. And when you meet timing with the preparation, so instead of sitting still while you wait for the right opportunity to come and is presented, in the meantime you need to do the work. Just to give you a context, the German Chancellor Fellowship was only offered for the first time in 2001. The call went out to South Africans. Previously it was offered to Brazil, China, India and Russia as well. And in the years leading to this application going out, or the call going out, I had participated in several scholarships and programs, and I honestly believe that the preparation the application process leading to every single opportunity I was then granted prior to this one helped me to be best positioned to apply for this particular fellowship. And I don't think that had this opportunity come earlier, that maybe I would have been selected. So I think, some of my skills were being refined, I was being prepared, and most importantly, my why was really, really being fine-tuned. I was clearer on what I wanted to do in the world, what questions I wanted to ask, what solutions I wanted to find, and most importantly, I was doing the work. So I think we need to also meet these opportunities with a fair amount of preparation. Don't forget to reach out to fellows who are currently doing the program. We're always happy to give advice and support and tips and pointers. And most importantly, good luck for any opportunity that you're applying for. I will share links that are connected to the German Chancellor Fellowship application process, what you need when you're finding a host, tips. You also will have access to profiles of previous fellows so that you can also have a look at what type of profile this type of opportunity is looking for. Maybe you'll be inspired to look into what other fellowships exist outside of the German Chancellor Fellowship. I know that the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation offers a lot of research fellowships, so I'll also leave a link for that down below for you. And I think that's it from me for now. I hope this is helpful. I tried my best to keep it structured, but to be honest, I think what I've shared today is honestly not new. It's very standard, generic things, and please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. Perhaps there's something I've left out and we can have a chat in the comments below. If there's anything that as you're watching you feel like maybe there's something I may have missed and could be valuable to share, please feel free to do so. So those are my tips, and applications are open for the German Chancellor Fellowship, and will close in October, so there's a lot of time and there's plenty of us who are here to offer support. And of course, feel free to reach out to me concerning any other application process, and I'm happy to engage and maybe even connect you to somebody who could be helpful. So that's it from me for now. Please do check out the first video for those maybe who've come to the very end and are still a bit confused about why I'm doing this, why I'm on this platform, what type of content you can expect here. But that's it from me for now. Till next time, and like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all next time. Bye.